This is the Last Temptation of John podcast, and I am John. I'm currently reading through the second book in my trilogy, this called The Rise of the Antichrist, and today I'm going to present to you two more chapters. These will be chapters 5 and 6. Now, obviously, if you haven't heard the beginning of this book or the earlier book, you should go back and listen to those. But if you are ready to continue, let's move forward. Chapter 5 I'm calling Friends in Low Places, and the date is June 26th. Are you ready? Let's go. So a couple days later, I was sitting in my living room trying to relax. It wasn't working. Now, all you need to do for this chapter is just sit and listen. Maybe you'll learn a thing or two. First off, I think it's pretty damn unfair that not only am I over 2,000 years old, but worse yet, I feel that way too. I mean, can you even imagine what I have to go through? Of course you can't. You're probably still in the first century of life. Talk to me when you reach your first millennium. Then we can compare war stories sometime. Until then, don't even begin to think you know me. At times like this, the only thing that gives me solace, besides my beer, is remembering my friend Frankie. Amuse me for a moment as I try to explain. Now, back in Book 1, I told you that my friend Frank Stoppa died a few years ago. Now let me tell you about how he lived. Again, perhaps you'll learn a thing or two. You see, Frank Stoppa was born here in Williamsport, Pennsylvania back in 1924 to a pair of Polish immigrants. He lived a good working man's life, retiring from a factory job from a company called Bethlehem Steel back in 1987, after working 33 years at the same job. I mean, you probably haven't even worked 3 years at the same job, much less 33. They just don't make people like they used to. Frank spent his life at work making parts for airplane engines, and after leaving that factory life, he didn't completely retire because he served as a park ranger at the White Deer Golf Course, if only because he needed something to do. I tried to join him there for a job, but quickly realized that I wasn't cut out for the whole working man thing. It's just too much of a grind, and that's not for me. But where Frank really came alive was when he wasn't working, at least not at his official job. For you see, Frank Stoppa was known as the mayor. Not of any city or township, but instead of pretty much every bar and classic club in a 50-mile radius of Williamsport. On any given night, Frankie could be found at one of his many hangouts, and I with him. You see, we were members of the VFW Club, the Keystone League, the American Legion, the Sons of Italy Italian Club. Although Frank was Polish, he was an honorary member of the Italian Club for some sort of services rendered, but that's the story for another time. We were also members of his beloved Polish club, the bar called the Sun's Cafe, owned by his son Albert, and my personal favorite, the Gesang Verein Harmonia Club. Listen, I'll give you a little tip. If you ever find yourself in Williamsport and you want to go to a place where you can get soused, go to the Harmonia. Of course, that's if you're lucky enough to get in, which by the looks of you probably isn't happening. Sorry. Although I didn't know him in his younger days, Frankie always said he was quite a hellraiser. After a rough-and-tumble childhood, a teenage Frankie and his buddy were apparently at the wrong place at the wrong time when a treasured town antique plane mysteriously, and I use the word mysteriously loosely, caught fire in Williamsport. Now, rather than stick around to endure the heat, a then 17-year-old Frankie left high school and his family to join the Marines and get out of Dodge. He joined the Marines during World War II, and he was quickly made a sergeant in the Corps. He also spent 19 months of his service in the South Pacific, becoming known as a Good Time Charlie wherever his wings touched down. After surviving the Guadalcanal campaign, I remember Frank telling me about how he nearly died when a bomber plane he was on crashed in the waters of the South Pacific due to a mechanical failure. But I also remember Frank telling me that he was the chief mechanic. Yep, that sounds like the Frankie I know. ever the ladies' man, Frankie claims that he had women lined up at every port along his travels. And while the phenomenon of children of American GIs from World War II is nothing new, I think we might know who is behind the unsolved mystery of why so many people on the Solomon Islands have Polish features. After all, Frank Stoppa was stationed there for a good bit of his tour and ever dreamed of going back to those beaches where he claimed he enjoyed the best years of his life. I wonder why. Now, although Frank later wed a saint of a woman and remained married for over 60 years, that marriage actually almost didn't happen because old Frank nearly outsmarted himself on one particular occasion. Let's see now. If I recall the story correctly, I remember Frank boasting to me about how there was a time when it was near the end of his military service and he apparently had so many women around the world that he was communicating with that he couldn't keep track of all the girls. So to save time, Frankie said he just used to write the same love letter to all the girls and just merely change the name of the girl at the top, yet all the while signing Love Frankie at the bottom of the letter. Now, there was just one problem with this strategy, for you see, Frankie actually had the gall to send that same letter to a pair of girls who lived back in Williamsport, and who, unbeknownst to him, had apparently become friends while he was away at the war. Imagine the scene, then, when these two women were at the local beach, which in Williamsport was a hangout on the shores of the Susquehanna River, and the women excitedly shared with one another a letter from their boyfriends. Can you see the problem? For when the girls compared the letters, they realized it was from the same boyfriend, and worse yet, it was the exact same letter. Amazingly, Frankie was still able to convince one of these girls that the letter was really meant just for her, and that she was the only one for him. Don't ask me how. As I said, Frank was quite charming. Indeed, that girl was named Pauline Taddeo, and smitten by the Frank Stoppa bug, she quickly welcomed Frank home after World War II, and they got married. Now, beyond Frank's romantic escapades, I was also continually amazed at how Frankie cheated death. Whether it be that plane crash in the South Pacific, the multiple times he rolled his car down the side of a mountain here in Williamsport, usually the result of a drunken incident, or even the fact that Frank had smoked and drunk well more than his fair share for nearly 70 years. I'd always considered Frankie kind of like a cat who had 9 lives, but who'd actually used 10 of them. Eventually, I just figured Frankie was an immortal like me. As usual, I was wrong. For you see, Frank died, just like the rest of all my friends over the centuries. Oh, I don't remember exactly what got to him. It could have been the heart condition, the emphysema, the liver cancer, the complications from deep vein thrombosis, or any of the other host of ailments that Frank suffered from. I don't know, and it really doesn't matter. But what I do know, what I remember as if it was yesterday, was this one fact. Confident of his chances in the afterlife, Frankie was not afraid to enjoy his life. He also was not afraid to die. Despite Frank's sins, and they were many, before he passed, Frank had made his peace with God and with his wife Pauline, who passed away back in 2004, and Frank was ready to move on to the next life. And when he finally went, it was on his own terms, like always. Frank's stubborn confidence in spite of the odds against him was something I will never forget. He was a good man. Frank taught me how to enjoy life again, or at least how to forget about my problem, if only for a short time, and for that I will always be grateful to him. And yet, Frankie was ravaged by the effects of age, just like me. The problem is, unlike Frankie, I can't get relief from my ailments. I too have aches. I too have pains. I have a host of undiagnosed diseases that you never heard of, and I carry those with me all the time. What, you thought just because I'm immortal I'm completely healthy? Hardly. I have the body of a man in his 80s, and I am forced to live within this decrepit husk every day of my horrible life. My friend Frank was able to pass on, Yet I can't do the same, and it's killing me from the inside out. What's that? You have a question? How did I have the strength to pick up that 200-pound intruder back in the beginning of Book 1? You want to know how does my body recover when I'm injured or even murdered? Look, I don't have time for those questions right now. All I can tell you is that Christ made me immortal shortly after his return from the grave, and later my body stopped aging while I lived on the island of Patmos and wrote the book of Revelation. Now, whenever I get injured, my body eventually recovers, but only back to the condition it was when I lived on Patmos, which is unfortunately that of an 80-something-year-old man, complete with all the problems of a man of that age. Does that sound like fun to you? Listen, my point in telling you all this is that it's no damn fun to be this old. I want some sympathy from you. Is that too much to ask? Okay, let's pause, take a breath. Let's move on to chapter 6. It's still the same date, okay, and I'm calling this chapter the seventh seal. The fact is that a couple hours passed, and yet nothing really changed for me. Oh, now I was sitting on my couch, only now I was getting ready to watch my Philadelphia Phillies play. You're wondering how can I watch baseball at a time like this? Man, if the end of the world really was coming, then I want to be like my friend Frankie and enjoy myself as long as I could. After all, God destroys both the blameless and the wicked, so why should I struggle in vain? Thanks for staying with us, Phillies broadcaster Tom McCarthy said from my new TV, a gift from a local charity. We have a doozy here, folks. 5-2, Giants in the lead in the bottom of the seventh. Bases loaded, 2 outs, and Carlos Santana is coming up to the plate. What's your take, John? Well, the Giants had to change their pitcher. McCarthy's partner, John Kruk, one of my all-time favorite players, jumped in with his color analysis. I mean, Bumgarner, he was on the verge of falling apart. Let's see what Miller can do with the mess he just inherited. And here's the pitch. Strike one! I sank deeper into my lazy boy. With my Phillies losing, the game was not to my liking. Naturally, I blamed the broadcasters. Oh, sure, McCarthy and Crucky were good, but for my money, I still prefer Harry Callis and Richie Ashburn. They were the perfect pair of Phillies announcers. Nonetheless, I couldn't curse at the TV like I wanted to because over on the sofa sat one of my friends. Craig Wozniak, a 22-year-old snot-nosed student from Lycoming College. Apparently, visiting me was somehow part of his college internship. Now, for my part, I could never quite recall how I got roped into the college's elderly outreach program, but whenever I tried to talk to someone there about removing my name from their lists, I was gently reminded that my utility bills were being paid for by a government assistance program and that the outreach endeavor was one of the so-called benefits of that program. Now, since my cable bill was part of this package, and since that's how I got access to my Phillies, inevitably I gave up my demands for privacy and thus occasionally allowed do-gooders like Craig the opportunity to come by. Oh, I wanted to get into streaming TV, but, when you're 2,000 years old, that's a little hard to figure out, so I'm stuck with cable. Anyway, on his last visit, Craig found out that my old TV had gone kaput. Now, the boy didn't ever learn the real story behind what happened to that TV, but even still, I think he was surprised to see the TV kick the bucket before I did. More importantly, on Craig's visit today, he brought with me a new 42-inch HD TV from the college's charity, and he even set it up for me. So hey, I guess these Generation Z kids are good for something, eh? So what do you think about your new TV monitor, Mr. John? Craig said as he admired the gift. You want me to show you how to use the remote? Ugh, I merely grunted. Craig waved the device at me again. Look here, sir. Now you don't have to get up to change the channel anymore. All you got to do now is click it like this. Don't change that channel, boy, I said. Oh, sorry. So what, you think our Phillies are going to pull it out, Mr. John? I don't know. Who's your favorite player, Mr. John? The one batting now. Oh, you like Santana too? Craig smiled, thinking he was finally making a connection with me. Yeah, he's always been mine too. No, I interrupted. I like whoever is at bat for the Phillies, boy, because that means we still have a chance to win. Oh, I see. Craig looked at his watch, suddenly pained with boredom. Swung on. It's a high fly ball. The Phillies might take the lead here. McCarthy then began to shout from the TV, back, back, back. Bzzzt. The screen was a blurry mess of lines. No! I shook my fist at the interruption. Hey, what's going on? Craig said as the TV refocused and we both looked upon a new scene. The Phillies game was replaced with the view from a dark cave within which two men were lying in squalid conditions. Gall darn it, not another special broadcast. At the moment, I was so upset I didn't really notice what was being shown on the screen. I don't know, Mr. John, Craig said. It looks too strange for a news report, brah. Those guys look like they're prisoners in some crazy medieval dungeon. It's creepy, man. Looking at the TV again, I recognized the two witnesses and realized that Elijah and Enoch were about to deliver a new prophecy to the world. Yet this only annoyed me all the more because it surely meant that I'd missed the rest of my Phillies game. Unfortunately, there was nothing I could do but sit and watch like the rest of the schmucks around the world. Now the prophet's cell looked cold and brutal, with dirty hay strewn about the floor and a hole in the corner for their toilet. Still dressed in those filthy burlap rags, Elijah and Enoch now had sores which blanketed their bodies. Heavy wrinkles notched their unshaven faces, and their oily hair stuck in ratted mats to their head. Yet it was their eyes, or rather their empty sockets, that captured my attention. It made it impossible to look away. Even I was taken aback by the scene now, for the more I stared at the prophets, the more I felt myself being pulled into the black caverns in their faces, as if they were the passage to a forsaken afterlife. It gave me a case of the jimmies, and it sent Craig into a full-on panic attack. Are they dead? Craig managed to spit out between breaths. How should I know? I lied, trying to brush him off. Suddenly I saw Enoch rise up. Swaying on his feet, the man gurgled a bit before proclaiming,
6 seals we have spoken of, yet another is to come.
Elijah then sat up and said,
and it too shall be broken.
But then, just like that, both men fell back to the ground in apparent exhaustion. For his part, Craig fell back on the sofa. What do you make of this all, Mr. John? I didn't reply, for I knew there was more to come. Peering through tightened eyelids, I grew even angrier by the second, waiting for the inevitable.
144,000 will escape,
Elijah murmured as if half asleep now.
Their names in the book of life,
Enoch averred.
Their robes will be washed white with the blood of the Lamb,
Elijah replied.
Oh!
Both prophets cried in unison, covering their ears in a futile attempt to ward off the booming of great trumpets, blasts which not only pummeled them but us as well. The rush of sound so loud I would have doubted if it shook the world over from thunder.
Disaster!
Enoch wailed.
Whoa!
Shouted Elijah. The seventh seal, I whispered, even as the seers cried it out to the world.
The seventh seal!
Again, the trumpets louder than before, and I felt as if the foundation of the Just then, the TV went dead, even as Craig and I tried to steady ourselves. Whoa, bro, what was that? I'm sorry, Mr. John, but I gotta get out of here. I gotta see if my family is okay. I watched as the boy raced out, apparently not giving a second thought to the elderly man he was supposed to be caring for. Now, in reality, I didn't really care that Craig had deserted me. Instead, I merely glowered in my chair, incensed with anger. Oh, God, what have I done that you oppress me like this? Why do you always spurn the work of my hands? Just kill me now and get it over with. Obviously, I didn't get my wish. Well, that's the end of our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Now be sure to visit our website at temptationofjohn.com, where you can read the full text version of this chapter. On our website, you'll find links to every podcast episode, and you can also join the Temptation of John Book Club. It's free to join, and you can get notified when new chapters are released. Again, you'll find all this and more at temptationofjohn.com.